Kill for me, Jesse. You've got the body, and I've got the brain. A Nightmare on Elm Street Part 2, Freddy's Revenge, stars Robert Englund, Mark Patton, Kim Myers, and is directed by Jack Shoulder. Wow, so here we are, everybody. We are finally doing the Nightmare series. Now, if you remember, I did Nightmare on Elm Street Part 1 the day after Wes Craven died. I wasn't planning on doing it back then, but I became kind of emotional and I wanted to do kind of a tribute to Wes. And just before that review, I had actually started my Friday reviews. I did the first one. And so I continued those, and I have been doing the Friday reviews probably over the last 5 months. So finally, here we are, and I am jumping back on the Nightmare series, and we're gonna do one of my favorite ones to discuss, and that is Freddy's Revenge. So let's go ahead and get into this. So the first Nightmare came out, and it was just a massive, massive hit. But Robert Shea, the producer, pretty much put all of his own money into the project. So he didn't really get to reap any of the benefits. He didn't really get to make a profit. But what he did get to keep was the franchise, the name. And really, Nightmare was the only thing New Line at the time had going for him. So a franchise was inevitable. As a matter of fact, the weekend that the first Nightmare came out, the distribution company came to Robert Shea and they said, hey, let's go ahead and make a sequel. This is a big hit. And so the question was, would Wes Craven come back to direct the second one? Now, the tensions between Wes Craven and Robert Shea are legendary. During the first movie, they were constantly just butting heads because they're both A-type personalities. So they kind of parted ways on the second one. And they just went with a completely new script. It was still in the same continuity, but they had brand new characters in this one. Nancy didn't even return, which to me is kind of shocking. I mean, if they would have went to Heather Langenkamp, she probably would have came back to do this one. As we know, she did the third one. So to me, that was just a really big bonehead move on their part. So in essence, part 2 was really rushed into production, and that alone caused a lot of the problems along the way. So part 2 picks up a few years after the first one. It takes place in the iconic Elm Street house, and you got this whole new family. And the main character really is Jesse, played by Mark Patton. He is kind of the final girl of the picture, even though it's a guy. And throughout the movie, he is constantly having these nightmares about Freddy. But in the nightmares, Freddy doesn't kill him. He kind of just plays with him, kind of haunts him. And really, he wants to get into the real world through Jesse. This is more of a possession type movie. It's more of a psychological slasher film, really, even more than the first one. And this was really a completely new angle on the franchise that really hasn't been done before or since. I mean, yeah, Freddy has come into the real world, time and time again, but he's never possessed a person in the real world and then physically came out of that person. Now, to me, the first scene in this movie is really great. It's one of the best, and it's one that's always stayed with me. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was a kid, I used to watch this movie all the time. It was one of those VHS nasties. And it's really the first movie that got me into the Nightmare series, because when the first one came out, I was really too young. But when this one came out, I was around 12, 13 years old, and I started really getting into horror movies. But like I said, I always remember that first scene when they're on the school bus, and Freddy is driving the school bus, and then this whole scene kind of turns into a nightmare. And I always thought school buses were kind of creepy anyway, and it'd be kind of a cool setting for a horror movie. And to me, this is one of the best, school bus horror scenes that I've ever seen. Matter of fact, I don't really remember seeing that many other ones, except for maybe Trick or Treat. But you got a couple different things working in that scene, because you got Freddy, who's scary by himself, and then you got this bus that just starts picking up speed. And then after that, it just turns into this nightmare world. So because of that scene, I thought Freddy's Revenge really started off on the right foot. Now let's talk about Freddy for a minute. I thought Robert Englund, he really just kind of came into his own in this movie. He talked a little bit more, but he still didn't step into that, almost comedic, campy side. There is a dark humor element to this movie, but it's not just straight up comedy like in the later movies. As a matter of fact, out of all the movies, I would probably wager that this might be the darkest Freddy has been, maybe until the remake. And I love that scene early in the movie when Freddy is talking to Jesse and he tells him to kill for me. And then he says, you have the body and I have the brain. I think that scene really set up the tone of the way Robert Englund was going to play Freddy. And what I found interesting behind the scenes is that originally they didn't want to pay Robert Englund the money to come back as Freddy. So they actually went with an extra, or kind of a stunt double. You know, they thought, hey, let's just do this kind of like a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees type character. And when they looked at the test footage, they realized we got to get Robert Englund back. He really is the heart of this movie. He is Freddy. And without Robert Englund, these movies just aren't interesting. Also, for being the only movie with a male lead, I really liked Mark Patton in this movie. I mean, when you get right down to it, he is a good actor. I thought he really elevated the material. He really seemed freaked out in a lot of those scenes. And there's a few scenes in this movie where he just breaks down. And I really felt for him as a character. And what's interesting is Brad Pitt and Christian Slater actually tried out for the part of Jesse. But to me, because of how unique Jesse is as a character, I don't think anybody else could have played him except for Mark Patton. And the reason for that is Mark Patton is a gay actor. At the time, he wasn't open about it, and this wasn't being presented as a quote-unquote gay movie. But what I find so amazing is that there are so many scenes, when you go back and watch this in hindsight, that are just glaringly homosexual. And when I watched this as a kid, I never picked up on any of those, which is just shocking to me now. And because of that, this has grown into somewhat of a cult classic, especially among the gay community. It's even been awarded the title of the most homosexual horror movie of all time. The one scene that's really just out of place and hilarious is the dance scene. The movie Risky Business with Tom Cruise had come out before, and Tom Cruise did this dance, but it never had kind of a gay undertone to it. But the way Mark Patton danced in this scene, there were some definite gay undertones. He was very feminine in the scene, and a lot of it was just silly. Mark Patton has said the whole experience with part 2 really just made him quit acting. He pretty much went into hiding for the next 30 years. And he recently came out, no pun intended, for the Never Sleep Again documentary. And I'd say I've watched that whole documentary, all 4 hours of it, and the part 2 section I find the most interesting. For years and years, the writer David Chaskin, he always denied that, there was this gay subtext to the movie. And even he came out and said, hey, yeah, this definitely had some homosexual undertones, and part of the reason being he himself was a gay male. I also enjoyed Kim Myers in this, and holy shit, she looks just like Meryl Streep. It's uncanny. But to me, she and Mark Patton, they really had great chemistry together, and part of that being, behind the scenes, they were just great friends. They were almost like best friends. And there are some tender moments between the two characters throughout. Now, as far as any cons for this movie, it does have some kind of silly scenes, especially the shower scene with Coach Snyder. A lot of that stuff just seemed really creepy, and not in a good way. Coach Snyder was just a creepy guy altogether, to be honest. And there's also one scene near the end where there's like a Freddy possessed dog, but the practical effects used, it looked like they spent $1.50 on it, and it just looks horrible. And I'll go ahead and say this is probably one of the most, I don't want to say hated, but disliked nightmare movies. But I'm on the other side of the fence to that. I actually have a good time with part 2. And so for that, I would definitely give it a purchase worthy. So guys, I want to know what you guys think of Freddy's Revenge. This is gonna be one that's really fun to talk about and debate in the comments. So looking forward to hearing your thoughts. And also, I'm gonna go ahead and create a playlist for the Nightmare series, so you can check out what I've reviewed so far and my future Nightmare reviews. And also, I'll post a link to my Friday playlist and my Halloween playlist, so that way you can go down there and check out all my big 3 horror icon slasher reviews. So anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to my channel, follow me on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and Humdrum out.